29. The global institution of education. The education did not change for more than 200 years. The proposal is the creation of a global and flexible structure of study programs, to get different certifications that are recognized globally and personalized by every culture. 29.1 The foundation of the design of the global education. The foundation of the design of the global education is the finality of the global society and needs of the other systems of the global society like the global sociology and global industry. The finality of the global sociology and its priority defines the essence of the global social institutions. The finality and reason to exist of the global sociology is the responsible survival of the humanity with this priority. 1. The survival and the raise of the new global generations of humans, developing them alive, with their own personal and cultural individuality. 2. The survival of the current generation. 3. The survival of older generations. The client of the global institution of the education is the new generation. Previously the customer was the society, and the work was to make fit students in the society through the institution of education. Now the work is to raise the new generations to get them to survive successfully as a global society. In the strategy for the global industry we have, the essential industry is the self-sustainable communities and houses in energy, food, water, and oxygen that modifies deeply the education process and infrastructure of schools and universities. 29.2 The importance to optimize the time required by the programs of study. For this reasons the proposed times are 13 years to get high school, 16 years to have a profession, 20 years to get a doctorate or specialization. The time of study is essential for the global society because 1. The survival of the individual and his family has a direct relation to his education. 2. To improve productivity in the global industry. 3. To adapt to changes in the needs of the labor market, increasing the chance to get a job. 4. To adapt to changes in the needs of the market, to adapt the business and industry, changing the business without changing their employees. 5. To get time for emotional and personal needs of the individual. 6. To give time to take other programs of study required by business and society. 7. To create a flexible group of program that gives flexibility to the process of learning of the individual and changes in his preferences. 6. Etc. 29.3 Annual meeting to analyze changes in global and local education. The global education will become more proactive, is necessary an annual meeting to analyze the new global and local adjustments, requirements from other institutions of the global society, requirement from students and professors, update of study programs in the global education, etc. 29.4 Recognition of the emotional and personal needs of humans. The survival of the humanity is the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual survival. For that reason, the global education has the responsibility in the emotional life of the humanity. Training and priority for the emotional need of abilities of individuals to get individuality and independence, to get a couple, a successful relation with his family, culture, and society, in all their roles and activities. Management of the health of oneself to reach the minimum global health requirement for the global individual. Transmission of experiences in their decision of previous generations, their regrets, and their celebrations. Certification in the effective birth control. For the project, the birth control for the wellness and growth of a healthy local and global community is essential. Certification in emotional and economic family welfare. This is the certification according to each culture to advise the couples how to reach a reasonable familiar welfare, because when they divorce, they requires two homes, usually will marry again and will require to support two families. Explaining emotional needs of the couple, showing their possible decision and consequences. 29.4.1 Training in the customs and values of the global and local culture and the strategy to survive as an individual in them. This is about how it works and how to get what they need from them. The culture always will block in some way his freedom and people needs to know how to get what they want in it. 29.5 Programs of study. The creation of a global methodology to create and update school and university programs of study. The creation of a certification in the programs of study for school and university, to qualify them. The creation of certification for tasks of the global society and global communities. 29.5.1 Change in the strategy to design programs of study. Define the minimal programs of study, mental abilities, write, read, mathematics, cultural abilities, history, social custom and values, emotional abilities, respect, self-esteem, physical defense, responsibilities with their own bodies to keep them healthy in the global society. Change in the certification methodology, creation of a global certification based on self-exams that must be done in specific location and conditions. Flexibility, chance to study in home, instead in going to school is available, like in other countries like United States. This flexibility, like teaching your kids the language of another country where you are planning to move, thinking in a concept of globalization, you live in a world. Change in the strategy of study working in modules of programs of study and trees of certification integrated globally, to enable migration and validation of studies. 29.5.2 Change in the organization of the areas of study in programs of study by specific area of knowledge. Each program of study covers an area of specific knowledge and has several levels of specialization. 1. Introductory area. 2. A basic area with example. 3. An advanced. 4. An expert, in example algebra. Each area of study, in example mathematics, has different areas of knowledge, like algebra. The global project stores the detailed list of programs of study and could store a copy of them under the authorization of the owners of the copyrights of that courses. 29.6 Certification. The strategy to get the certification in high school, professional, and doctorate is: first is the score. Every study program has a score in high school, a specific profession or doctorate. Once you take enough courses and reach that score, you get that certification. Second, there are minimum requirements imposed by the local and global education. Third is the certification of the update of the study programs the individual had taken. Fourth is the change in the tree of certification that requires taking new study courses to keep their certification as professional or doctorate. 29.7 Change in the concept of memorization to the documentation of study and the description of the procedures. First, the documentation of the programs of study. Memorization is important, but nobody remembers 10 years after most of the details of what he studied on school or university. For that reason, the education requires the memorization of material, but using the documentation of the program of study, like a calculator. Second, the correct execution of procedures. Knowledge had increased dramatically. There are specializations for each area. No matter how expert you are, if you do not execute a specific procedure in the correct way, you are doing bad job. This means instead of focusing in a certification got with a great deal of memorizing the material, you focus in the fact the employee had investigated the study program and the procedure, before executing a new and critical task. Third, there are knowledge that will rarely be used, and to waste time in memorizing the completely is senseless. You only need it exists and when to use it. Fourth, in the same way, you have a calculator at hand, you have your study programs at hand. You take exams with the material of the program of study. The exams are designed to be taken with the material of study, giving less time. The critical information you have to remember in any area is clearly specified in the program of study. This change in the concept of memorization creates the custom that is necessary to study again and retake the certification before applying a knowledge you did not apply several years ago. And you need to investigate the specific procedure independent of your certification and experience. 29.8 The self-test technology to allow a global certification in the global education. The self-test methodology is a complex task to develop exams that must be taken in specific locations. They must recorded and stored too. These tests are designed to test the critical information and to make several validations, and requires great efforts to design them. The self-tests are by by itself a great improvement in education. This test allows to take the same test in several languages in countries getting a global certification. Increasing the amount of question compensate the trap to learn them. If you learn the answers to some hundreds of questions, is the equivalent to know the material. And giving a practice test of the self-test has the same effect. Taking a practice of a self-test is to study. 29.9 Change in the way the knowledge is transmitted. The copy from Blackboard or transcription from dictates is removed. Instead of that there are a presentation of visual enriched material. You have all the program of study. You see the material and see enriched material auditive and visually. You have to understand the concept, make some exercises, written previously, don't have to copy them. You receive the documentation of the program and the self-exam. Take a self-test exam. That closes the process of learning of a program. The contractor must give specific requirements in the knowledge required for your work, the study program and level required, and procedures to execute, specifying which self-tests must be retaken. Once you have to apply that knowledge after you graduate, or after years of work, you have to restudy and retake self-exams. You have to investigate the procedures to execute and practice them if necessary. The process updates to the knowledge and procedures, in specific periods of time, is a new important aspect of the global education. 29.10 Change in the global social role of professor. He is the responsible to motivate the student. The professor is responsible to get the students to approve their studies. If one student reprobate is his responsibility, then he must explain why it happened. The professor, now, does not design the course, doesn't dictate the course or exercises. The documentation is there, the information to teach is there, the exercises are there. The professor validate the presence of the student, the dedication in time to study, the behavior of groups and individuals. Answer specific questions, to help and resolve situations faster. The professor is to create an emotional connection between the students as group. The professor is there to motivate students. The professor is not forced to know all the program of study but yes to manage them, and using them to help the student to resolve together a problem. The professor can be omitted in adults and sometimes in teenagers, and that responsibility is moved to the group of study. 29.11 The new concept of group of study. The change of the education to program of study you decide to take. There is a high possibility that a group of people start to study different program of studies in the same class, like in an office everyone is with his own responsibilities, but they are still a group and can share some program of studies or not. The reason to continue as a group of study is the company, the friendship, the emotional connection, the motivation to study and strive. The group of study, if there is no professor, must take his responsibilities, that is to control assistance, support, and motive. 29.12 Programs of study suggested by Global Association to the global communities. In an analysis, the Global Association, based on the need of the culture and community, suggest programs of studies. That program of studies can include adults, in program like community protection to confront positively the mafia in the area. This is a personalized support the Global Association must give to the local community, once every period, or at request of a member or the global community. 29.13 The new school designed to raise and protect the new generation. Under this new concept of global community, the schools generates food, water, energy, oxygen and creates homes. The schools becomes part of the emergency plan, and raise of new generations. This means the schools can have annexes to hold abandoned or abused child, where they continue their studies meanwhile work in the school in the process of generation. The schools must be designed to store members of the community in an emergency. This means the design of their structures must be done thinking on that, soccer fields roofed, to store people if necessary, but this is not an obligation, is something that must be designed by the community. The schools are designed to teach to create simple homes, with low cost that give the essential comforts to all human, in the essential abilities students will develop. The schools are designed as a model of global sociology, where teachers act with sacrifice to the next generation, that is, their main function is the dedication of time and attention to make students succeed. The existence of this new educational system is that it focuses on those who are required. The success of the students is the teachers, not the students. Socially, the teachers are responsible for the success of the students. The students have their responsibilities, but to those who are required in cases of problems, it is the teachers. They carry with them the stress and the responsibility to carry and move forward the new generation. New skills for teachers. This implies that teachers require a set of strategic skills and social and psychological techniques that allow them to advance students. Students socially have responsibility to fulfill their school and labor obligations within the schools, because they must generate income to subsist. Another change, some students in the school are possible to be able to subsist their families. 29.14 The development of economic independence in students, kids, and teenagers, the payment from their work in school and university in the basic industry. Their work will be the industry of generation of food, water, house, and oxygen, is the beginning of taking responsibility in what is the basic global industry that will keep humanity alive. This is a foresight, because in the situation of an emergency a kid or a teenager will have enough knowledge to protect and feed themselves. This is very important because schools will have structures to generate the essentials, to allow them to work, and at the same time that structures can be used in emergencies, and to support other near communities in an emergency. This means, if there is near community in emergency they will have a temporary place and equipment to subsist. Students must learn to design, create, maintain, and generate the basic resources, and they must do it to keep the community alive. This is a very controversial matter. This can be judged as child work in some countries, in others will be an option to avoid slavery and poverty, avoiding girls to be sold as slave. In Japan kids must clean their schools to develop gratitude. In other countries to force kids to clean his school is looked as a denigration and abuse. Finally, the global project is based on individuality. Every country and community can decide on it, but the global project advises what he thinks is advisable, the economic independence of kids, that gives them mental strength and consciousness of his future, giving him strength to face abuses in his family and with friends, increasing his self-esteem. The schools should belong as a formal member of the productive system. This means there should be a plan to participate in the productive system. The payment to the students for their work in school is imperative. The payment for his study work will be agreed previously, it will be in money or in specie. Mechanisms to avoid abuses and clear legal normative for students and the benefit they must receive for his work on school. The point is the students must get a reasonable payment for his work study on school. Always will be excuses like instead of pay them, they will do something that was really imperative for the school, even to avoid to close the school. The imperative is the payment to the students. If some of them voluntarily decide to give it, is his decision. The possibility of abuses and use to students to get money, and with any excuse to force to focus more in the production than in learning, requires a clear legal normative, because no matter how good is the people this new functionality will generate lot of problems, but too will empower the people and community. The abuses will happen, but the generation of food and water will happen, and that will improve the community directly or indirectly. This means that even in fraud, there will be a benefit for the community. 29.15 The design of the tree of learning. The tree of learning is the design of the different paths, from school to university and specialties, showing the course and level that are mandatory and their requirements. For voluntary study, there will be suggested programs of study for specialties, for specific business, task, etc. The tree will show the accepted courses global and locally to get that certification. Every culture and country must design his own tree of learning. 29.16 The market of program of studies and certifications. The program of study will be developed like projects, some from them by the global project, others in countries and other by individual or business. The program of study will have a global certification from the Global Education and another certification locally in the country and the culture, who will define the structure of their tree of learning. Some of them will be developed, donated, or free, other will require the payment of a fee for the course of membership.